I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, staring at the broken pieces of everything I thought was real. My wife, Lisa, had always seemed perfect, at least on the surface. She was the kind of woman who smiled too much in the mornings, and her laugh was like a warm blanket. I trusted her more than I trusted anyone, and that's what makes what I found so sickening. It started a few days ago, right before my father's funeral. The timing was terrible enough. Losing him was a blow I hadn't prepared for, and I was already walking around in a haze of grief, trying to hold everything together. But then I started noticing things. Little things. Her phone was always in her hand more than usual. She'd slip away into the bedroom or the bathroom, whispering into her device, her voice tight and hurried. I thought maybe she was just emotional, or maybe she was talking to a friend. I didn't want to overthink it, not then. Until today. Today, I finally found the real proof. I was rummaging through her purse, just a quick check to grab her phone to look at. Something I wasn't snooping, I swear. I just wanted one quick look. That's when I saw it. An envelope tucked deep near the bottom with her boss's name scrawled across it in hurried handwriting. My stomach dropped. I pulled it out without thinking, and then I saw the photo inside her in a bed wrapped around her boss like they'd been doing this for months. Her hair was tousled, her face flushed, and his hand was gripping her waist. The worst part, the date was just 2 days before my dad's funeral. I held it in my hand, trembling, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. It was so real, so raw. I could smell her perfume faintly, hear the faint rustle of the paper in my trembling fingers. I felt my vision blur just a little. I had to sit down on the edge of the bed. How could she do this to me? At my lowest point, she's out there, lying, cheating, while I was drowning in grief. The betrayal was so thick I could taste it, bitter and metallic. I thought I knew her. I thought I knew us. But it was all a lie. I don't even recognize the person I've become right now. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. The anger was rising so fast I could feel my palms slick with sweat. I clenched my fists so tight I thought my nails would break the skin. I looked at her picture again, her face so innocent, so unaware of the chaos she'd caused. That's when I realized I couldn't just confront her without a plan, not this time. I had to think. I couldn't let her know I found out, not yet. At least, not until I had something solid. I needed proof that I could hold over her head. I needed to know how deep this went, how long she'd been lying, who else knew, or if this was just a one-time mistake. Whatever it was, I had to be ready because revenge was the only thing keeping me upright right now. I slipped the photo back into the envelope and shoved it deep in my pocket. My mind was racing, every nerve on edge. I looked around the room. Her side of the bed was still made, but I could see the faint imprint of her body on the pillow. She'd been lying there just hours ago, pretending everything was normal. I could still smell her perfume, lavender and something sickly sweet mixing with the scent of my own anger. It was then I made a silent vow. Whatever this was, she wasn't going to get away with it, not without paying a price. The first step, gather everything I could find. I needed to know every detail, every lie, every deceit. I couldn't let her keep feeding me this illusion, not anymore. But right now, I just felt numb. Like I'd been punched hard enough to knock the wind out of me. I looked at her laptop, her phone, the little things she'd been hiding. My fingers trembled as I prepared to dig through her digital life. Because if she'd betrayed me this badly, I wanted every piece of her betrayal laid bare. And I knew this wasn't just some random fling. No, this was planned, deliberate. The timeline, the evidence. I was already piecing it together. She'd been cheating for weeks, maybe months, and I'd been blind to it. The betrayal cut so deep I felt my entire body tense up, my stomach twisting so fiercely I almost doubled over. I'm not the kind of guy who does revenge, not normally, but this, she crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. I'd let her play her games for too long, pretending everything was okay. She thought I was naive or maybe just too broken to notice. But I saw now that her lies had a pattern and I was going to expose every single one. I stared at her phone, ready to unlock it, ready to find out just how far she'd gone. I was prepared for the truth, no matter how bad it was. Because once I had that, she'd regret ever betraying me. I just didn't know how much it would hurt to see what was really hidden behind her pretty face. I managed to unlock her phone without much trouble. I guess she was careless, or maybe she thought she'd get away with it because I was so distraught. Whatever the reason, I was glad. The messages, the photos, everything was right there, staring back at me. I scrolled through her texts, her social media messages, and it hit me like a punch in the gut. This wasn't just a fling, it was a deep, twisted affair. There were texts from her boss, Mark, that made my stomach churn. Flirty messages, late-night conversations that sounded more like a lover's quarrel than a professional exchange. It was obvious they'd been sneaking around, hiding behind code words and emojis. I saw the times, late at night, early mornings. I could feel the cold sweat on my palms as I read her words, pretending everything was fine between us. How long had this been going on? How many times had I missed the signs? I remember reading one message, just a few days before my father's funeral, where she told him she couldn't wait to see him again. That single line made my chest tight. I felt a wave of nausea and anger clash inside me. She'd been lying to me all along, hiding this scandalous affair while I was sinking into grief. That's when I realized I'd been a fool, a blind fool. I closed her messages, feeling the weight of her betrayal seep into every fiber of my body. I needed evidence, undeniable proof, so I kept digging. Her email accounts, her social media. I found a deleted chat with Mark where they'd planned their meetup, their secret rendezvous, right before. Everything with my dad fell apart. That confirmed what I suspected all along. This wasn't just a mistake. It was calculated, cold, and deliberate. My head was spinning, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't confront her just yet, not without a plan. I had to prepare myself, get more leverage. I didn't want her to spin some story, to deny it all, or worse, to turn it around on me. No, I needed her cornered with no way out. I decided to download every piece of her digital life, her passwords, her photos, her emails. I'd keep this as my insurance, my ace in the hole. I wanted to see if she could lie her way out of this mess. I wanted to see if she'd try to deny, to manipulate, or to apologize. Whatever her next move, I would be ready. And then I made one more discovery, something that made my blood run cold. Hidden in her emails was a receipt for a hotel booking, for the night of the day she'd supposedly been working late. I remembered her telling me she'd been stuck at the office, working on a report. But there it was, proof. She'd been with him all along, in a different city, in a different bed. That was the final nail. Now I knew the truth, and I knew how much she'd betrayed me. I sat there, staring at her phone, my mind racing. Every second I spent digging, I felt like I was peeling back layers of her lies. And underneath, I saw the real person she'd been hiding, cold, calculating, and completely unfaithful. What I hadn't yet decided was what I was going to do with all this. I could walk away, leave it all behind, but that wouldn't feel right. Not for me. Not after this. No, I wanted her to feel this, to feel what it was like to be betrayed at the worst possible moment. I needed her to understand that I wasn't some naive fool anymore. I closed her phone, my hands trembling, and looked around her side of the bedroom. Everything was still in its place, but nothing felt the same. Her perfume was faint, but I could still smell it lingering in the air, mixing with my anger. I wanted to rip her world apart, piece by piece, and make her see just how much she'd hurt me. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I had to bring someone into my plan, someone I could trust, because revenge, I realized, couldn't be just about causing pain. It had to be calculated, precise. I had to make her see that her lies had consequences, that her betrayal would cost her everything she cared about. I had a plan forming now, sharp and clear in my mind. It was time to turn her world upside down. I just had to figure out the last details before I executed it. But deep inside, I knew I was already preparing to make her pay. And I didn't care how much it hurt her, because she was the one who had crossed a line I'd never imagined crossing myself. I spent the next couple of days in a fog. Every time I tried to think straight, my mind kept circling back to her betrayal, her lies, her secret meetings, the way she'd looked me in the eyes and lied to my face. Each detail was like a knife twisting deeper. I couldn't focus on anything else. Everything else felt insignificant compared to this revelation. But I knew I had to be smart. If I wanted to make her pay, I needed more than just anger. I needed leverage. I started plotting my revenge carefully, making sure each step was calculated. I dug through her social media accounts and found her other contacts, friends, even a few people I didn't recognize. I wanted to understand her network, see who else might be involved or aware of her affair. Not that I expected any of them to be innocent, but I wanted to know what I was dealing with. One thing became clear: this wasn't just a fling. This was a carefully planned affair, likely fueled by her desire for excitement or maybe just boredom. Either way, she'd been hiding this from me for months. I felt sick just thinking about it. How much I'd trusted her, how much I'd shared with her, all thrown away. It was like waking up from a nightmare, but the nightmare was real and I was living in it. I also started to think about her triggers. What would make her slip up? I remembered that her phone was always guarded, but she was sloppy with her passwords and her privacy. I set up some simple traps, fake emails, fake messages, and kept an eye on her activity. It wasn't about spying for the sake of it. I wanted to know exactly how deep this went, how far she was willing to go. My plan was slowly taking shape. First, I would confront her with everything: her messages, her hotel receipts, the photos. Not in a rage, but with cold certainty. She'd have to face the consequences of her betrayal. I wanted her to realize that her lies had consequences. She could no longer hide behind her facade of innocence. But there was more. I wanted her to feel what I'd been feeling: humiliation, regret, and a sense of loss. So I decided I'd make her feel just a fraction of what she'd made me feel. I'd make her realize how fragile her life was now, how easily I could destroy her world if I chose to. One evening, I bought a burner phone, a cheap, untraceable device. I set up a fake account, starting a conversation with her boss, Mark. I kept it casual, sounding friendly but with just enough edge to make him curious. I wanted to see if he'd slip up, if he'd reveal more. Maybe I'd even bait her into a mistake, see how far she'd go to cover her tracks. I knew this was risky, but I had to push her, test her limits. I also planned my main confrontation. It wouldn't be during her emotional high, not when she'd expect it. No, I'd wait for the right moment, when she was most vulnerable, probably after she thought she'd gotten away with everything. That's when I'd strike, and she'd have no choice but to face the truth. The final part of my plan involved her belongings. I'd collect everything that could serve as evidence: her phone, her laptop, any other devices she used. I'd keep it all in one place, ready to be unleashed if she tried to deny or manipulate her way out of it. This was about accountability. I also contemplated the emotional fallout. I wasn't just going to dump the evidence in her lap and walk away. No, I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions. I'd let her see that I was serious, dead serious, and that I was willing to destroy everything she'd built if it meant revealing her true face. And so I waited, watching her every move, every glance, every word, every tiny sign of guilt or arrogance would be fuel for my fire. I knew she'd try to deny it. I knew she'd try to lie her way out of it, but I had the truth and I was ready to use it. The moment was coming and I wasn't going to back down. The question was, how much more would she reveal before I finally made her face what she'd done? And would she ever see the damage she'd caused, or would she just keep pretending? I was about to find out. The days felt like a slow drip of anticipation and anger. Every morning I'd wake up with that familiar knot in my stomach, knowing I had everything I needed to blow her world apart, but I had to be patient. Patience is the hardest part when you're burning with betrayal. I kept my head clear, sticking to my plan, but inside I was seething. I kept a close eye on her, monitoring her messages, checking her movements. I could tell she was hiding something. The way she'd glance over her shoulder when she thought I wasn't looking, her nervous fidgeting when she used her phone. I noticed her trying to hide her phone from me more than once, which only fueled my suspicion that she knew I was onto her. That was a mistake, because I'd been planning my move for days now. One night she came home late, more late than usual, and I knew she'd been with him again. Her eyes were red, her cheeks flushed. She tried to put on her innocent face, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I blocked her in the living room when she tried to sneak past me. "Where have you been?" I asked, my voice low but steady. She hesitated, then mumbled, "At work, long night." I leaned in slowly, controlling my temper, and showed her the evidence I'd collected. Her eyes widened just a little, but she quickly masked it. "Oh, come on," I said, voice colder than steel. "You think I do know about Mark, about everything?" Her face flickered with panic. It's not what you think. Really, I spat. Because I've got the photos, the hotel receipts, the messages. And I realize you lied about everything, about your late nights, about your work. How long has this been going on? She swallowed hard. It's just a mistake. I never meant to hurt you. That lie didn't even merit a response. I just stared at her, feeling the rage boil over. I'd been so blind, so trusting, shit, I'd even been proud of her. And now I saw who she really was. I wanted to destroy her, to make her feel every ounce of what she'd done. But I knew I had to stay smart. I needed her to confess outright, to break down and admit everything. That would be my proof, my ammunition. Tell me, I said, voice strained. Did you sleep with him? Be honest now. For a moment her face twitched with guilt, then she looked away. I could see her trembling. That was enough. That was the crack I needed. You're damn right I did, she finally whispered, voice trembling. I couldn't help myself. It just happened. I clenched my fists so hard I thought I'd break my own fingers. That wasn't just a confession. It was a knife to the chest. I'd known on some level she was unfaithful, but hearing her admit it made everything real. It was like losing my footing, falling into a dark pit I couldn't climb out of anymore. While I was mourning my father, I said, voice low and bitter, you were out screwing your boss. That's a real fine way to show respect, Lisa. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, but I knew it was a show. That's when I realized she hadn't even begun to understand the damage she'd caused. I had to make her see what she'd done to me, what she'd done to us. I told her I needed some space, that I was going to think about everything. I sent her to the bedroom, but I didn't sleep. Instead, I stayed up all night planning my next move. I had enough evidence now, enough proof. It was time for her to pay on my terms. The following morning, I sat her down again, this time with a plan laid out in my head. No more games, no more lies. I let her see I was serious. I told her I'd be making some calls, bringing in someone she'd never expected. That got her attention. Her face twisted with fear for just a second, then she quickly masked it again. But I saw it just enough. I handed her a piece of paper with a simple instruction: pack her things, move out, no protest. I wanted her gone before she could spin her web of lies any further, because once I'd handed her that note, there'd be no turning back. I got up slowly, feeling the adrenaline course through my veins. I watched her pack her things with trembling hands, her face blank but eyes darting around. I handed her the keys to the house, then told her to leave. You're done, I said quietly. Don't come back, don't call, don't try to manipulate your way out of this. You betrayed me too badly, this is over. She looked at me, her lips trembling, but I just turned and walked out of the room. As I closed the door behind her, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with emptiness. The damage was done. My trust was shattered. But at least now she was gone. I sat on the porch, staring at the empty house. The air was thick, heavy with all the things I couldn't say. I realized I'd been living in a fantasy, holding onto a lie. Now I could finally breathe again. And that's when I knew this was the start of rebuilding something, or maybe just starting over. Either way, it was better than living in her shadow. Sometimes you have to burn everything to the ground to see what's left standing. And right now, what's left is the truth. The days that followed were a blur of quiet reflection and messy clarity. I felt hollow, like someone had ripped out the core of who I was, but at the same time, there was this strange sense of relief. She was gone, the house was quiet, and for the first time in a long while I could breathe without her lies suffocating me. I spent most of the day packing up her things. It wasn't a sentimental process. I was just removing everything that reminded me of her, every piece of her existence in my life. I didn't want her scent lingering in the house, so I threw out her clothes, her makeup, and anything that felt like her. The sound of her voice, the ghost of her touch, it all evaporated with each box I filled. By evening, I was left with an emptiness I couldn't quite process. I sat on the porch, staring out at the horizon, feeling both numb and alive at the same time. I wasn't sure what I'd expected, but it wasn't this hollow ache, this numb emptiness. Still, I knew one thing: I had to face what came next. A few hours later, I decided I couldn't keep everything bottled up. I pulled out my phone and made a call, one I'd been contemplating for days. I called Mark, her boss. It was time he knew I'd uncovered the truth. I kept my voice steady, calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. "You know who this is," I said, and he hesitated. "I've got everything. The photos, the receipts, the messages I know about you and Lisa. His voice sounded nervous, like he'd been caught in the act. Look, man, I didn't mean for. Save it. I cut him off. You're done. I want you to think about what this means for your career, your reputation. Because I'm not the kind of guy who lets this slide. You want to keep your job, your life. You'll stay away from her, and I suggest you delete every trace of her from your life. Because if I find out you're still involved, I'll make damn sure everyone knows what you are. He was silent for a moment. Then he muttered, "Got it." That call was enough. I knew Mark wouldn't come near her anymore, and that was all I needed to confirm that my revenge was complete in its most basic form. I'd made him realize I was serious, that I had leverage. But the truth was, I wasn't quite done. No, I needed to hit her where it hurt the most, her reputation, her pride. I wanted her to see that her actions had consequences, and I wasn't going to be the one to clean up her mess. So I started working on a plan. I reached out to some of her friends, people she trusted, people who would listen. I told them what I knew carefully, without anger or accusations, just the facts. I didn't want to ruin her completely, at least not yet. I just wanted the truth out there so she couldn't hide behind her pretty face anymore. One friend, a woman named Sarah, responded first. She was shocked, but she listened. "You're doing the right thing," she said softly. "She's not the person you thought she was." I nodded. "I just want everyone to know. She lied to me, betrayed me while I was mourning. That's not something I can forgive." Over the next few days, I kept that momentum. I posted a gentle but honest account of everything. No specifics meant to humiliate, just enough to let her true colors show. I didn't want people to hate her, but I wanted them to see her for what she was: a liar, a cheat, a betrayer. The fallout was immediate. Her closest friends started distancing themselves, and her work was starting to catch wind. She called me a few times, pleading, crying, trying to manipulate. I didn't answer. I knew better than to get pulled into her web again. Finally, I felt the weight lifting. It was like I'd been carrying a stone in my chest, and now I'd let it fall. The rage, the betrayal, it was all still there, but I was managing it better now. I'd made the decision to cut her loose completely. No contact, no regrets. That night I stood outside, looking up at the stars. The quiet was deafening, but in that silence I found a strange peace. I'd faced everything: the betrayal, the lies, the revenge. It was a brutal road, but I was still standing. I learned something about myself through all this. I'm stronger than I thought. I don't need someone who'd betray me at my lowest. I don't need to be part of their twisted game. And most importantly, I realized I don't have to be a victim of someone else's choices. I can walk away, rebuild, and heal. It's going to take time, sure, but I know now that I hold the power to decide my future. I just hope everyone else out there facing betrayal remembers. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply walking away and choosing yourself over someone who no longer deserves your trust. It's been a few weeks since I handed her the keys and watched her walk out that door. The house feels different, empty, but somehow lighter. Like I'd been carrying a heavy stone around my neck for years, and finally I managed to set it down. I still feel the sting of her betrayal, the rawness of everything she put me through, but I also feel something else: clarity. In those days, I spent a lot of time reflecting. I realized how much I'd let her manipulate my trust, how I'd ignored the red flags that were right in front of me. I see now that I was too afraid to confront the truth, too worried about losing what we had, even when deep down I knew it was already gone. But losing her, as painful as it was, has also freed me from a lie I'd been living in. I went to the bank today and filed for divorce. It was straightforward, no drama. I handed over the papers with a sense of finality I'd never felt before. As I walked out, I felt a strange sense of peace, like I'd finally taken control again. She's out of my life now, and I can start rebuilding from scratch. I've also started therapy. It's helping me process everything: the betrayal, the anger, the grief. I've learned that healing isn't a straight line, but it's a path I need to walk. I don't expect to forget what happened overnight, but I do know I won't let it define me forever. Looking back, I realize that betrayal is a kind of fire. It hurts, sure, but it also purifies. It forces you to confront your weaknesses and your strength. I found out who I really am in those moments, someone capable of standing tall even when everything is falling apart. That's a gift I never knew I had. To anyone out there going through something similar, trust me, you're stronger than you think. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also opens your eyes. It forces you to see what's real and what's not. The pain will fade, but the lessons will stay with you. In the end, I decided that my happiness isn't worth sacrificing for someone who'd betray me at my worst. I'm choosing to focus on myself now, to find peace in my own company and rebuild what was lost. I don't regret the pain because it made me realize my worth. So I'm closing this chapter with a simple truth. Trust is fragile, but strength is. Sometimes, you have to let go of what no longer serves you, no matter how hard that is. Because in the end, your life isn't about revenge or anger. It's about finding your way back to yourself, stronger and wiser than before. And that's exactly what I intend to do.